Hello, everyone, and welcome to Scrambled. Today, I'm honored to welcome Brian Perry, co-founder of Ethan's Ohana, an inspiring nonprofit built from deep roots. After the passing of his son Ethan, a courageous 12-year-old who discovered joy and healing through solving Rubik's Cubes during his pediatric cancer treatment, Brian and his wife launched this movement to ensure no child or family feels forgotten during their cancer journey. Since 2023, they've donated over 1,500 Rubik's Cubes and STEM-related items through initiatives like Cubes Against Cancer, offering comfort, hope, and resilience to young patients nationwide. Thank you, Brian, for joining me today.
Thank you, Sanjay, for having me.
Could you begin by sharing a little bit about Ethan's story?
Yeah, so Ethan was a beautiful, bright 12-year-old boy. Right before he was diagnosed with cancer, he was an amazing son. God gifted my wife Angie and I with two beautiful boys. We have an older son, Aiden, and our youngest, Ethan. And Ethan was very science STEM oriented. He was a huge gamer, loved to play, Roblox and Minecraft and those kind of things. Typical 12-year-old kid. And he was also played the violin, so he was also musically talented. Unfortunately, in the summer of 2020, he wasn't feeling well, and we took him to the hospital, and then we heard the words that no parents ever want to hear: your child has cancer. Sadly, he was diagnosed with T cell lymphoblastic lymphoma. We started treatment, and then unfortunately, the cancer had some other plans, and he wound up relapsing in the December of 2020, and unfortunately, 3 months later, after the relapse, he passed away in March of 2021. And how he got into cubing in the hospital was one of the child care specialists at the hospital here in Houston gave him a Rubik's Cube because it was really good for his hand-eye coordination. And he says, "Oh, I've always played with these cubes, but I've never really solved one." And so he went, he took his iPad, he went online, he watched a YouTube video, and then 2 hours later, he figured out how to solve it. And
Wow.
so from that moment forward, and that was pretty early on in his cancer, from
Yeah.
that moment forward, as doctors and nurses would come into the room, he would say, "Oh, mix it up," and then right in front of him, within like maybe 30 seconds to a minute, he would solve it. And so it became his thing. And then then he, of course, he wanted the 2x2s and the 3x3. He had the 3x3s and some of the other cubes, and so he always had cubes around, and he always would solve them. And this is actually one of his cubes that he has solved, so I don't ever mix it up because unfortunately, I don't know how to solve a Rubik's Cube
Wow.
myself. I am trying to learn, but the older you get, the harder it
Right.
is to learn new things. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, funny enough, we've actually taught people like almost at the age of around like 80. So I don't think I think you should be able to learn it. Age is not an excuse.
true. Yeah.
Yeah. So, can we continue this conversation about Ethan and maybe discuss the significance of the name Ethan's Ohana for the nonprofit?
Yeah, Ethan's Ohana started. You could see over my shoulder. I have
Okay.
there's a picture of Ethan right there, and then with Ethan is a stitch. And basically, ever since Ethan was a little kid, he fell in love with the cartoon Lilo and Stitch.
Okay.
And so, if you're familiar with Lilo and Stitch, it's Hawaiian, and there's a line in it that says "Ohana" means family, and family means no one gets left behind or forgotten. And like I said, he loves Stitch, and in his hospital room, he did like a lot of artwork, and he had drew this picture of Stitch holding a sign that said Ohana. And so that's kind of where the Ohana came from. And so we named our nonprofit Ethan's Ohana. And you could see here, like I got I'm wearing my shirt today, and, it's a Rubik's Cube with a hibiscus flower for Hawaii. And then there's a little, his initials are right here on the red. His favorite color was red. So, and that's kind of where Ethan's Ohana came from. It was this kind of, my wife and I, we turned pain into purpose. You know, there were a lot of organizations that helped us when he was going through treatment and even after he passed away. And, you know, we wanted to give back to others. And so we just kind of came up, you know, we were started with acts of kindness, and then, you know, we just kind of grew from there. And, you know, the nonprofit is run by my wife and I, and Ethan's older brother sits on our board. It's the three of us.
Okay.
And you know, like I said, we to date, you had said 1,500. I think we're close to almost over 2,000 now. You know,
Wow.
we partnered with the World Cube
Yeah.
Association, Matt Lee, who funny story how I met him.
Okay.
Too, but you know, he's kind of partnered with us, and they have these cube competitions around the country, and then, you know, the competitors, they will come and donate a 3x3 cube, and then you know, they'll gift them to like a Ronald McDonald House in the area. You know, like they did one out in California, and they donated to a Ronald McDonald House out in California, and it was you know, and we just kind of spread the love and spread the joy and spread the kindness that way.
That's good.
Yeah.
In your own words, what is the core mission of Ethan's Ohana?
You kind of said it
I
at the
think
beginning.
I think I can start saying it.
It's kind of, our core mission is to really make sure that that families that are battling pediatric cancer are not left behind or forgotten. And, you know, we just do what we can to try to ease the burden of that. You know, in a lot of pediatric cancer patients, you know, in the hospitals, a lot of the toys, we discovered this with Ethan, they were geared towards the younger set of kids. You know, they were, and there was not a lot of toys and things that were geared towards Ethan's age of 12.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of why we picked the cubes to go into the hospitals, and a lot of kids love them. You know, I mean, they're, you know, we get requests for them online. We have a form online. We're always receiving cubes. Sometimes, you know, we have like an Amazon wish list. Sometimes, you know, oh, we got a package, and you open it up and it's some cubes, and then we, you know, we'll give them to the hospitals or give them to the Ronald McDonald House. You know, living in the Houston area, we've got, you know, three main pediatric cancer hospitals here. We've got Children's Memorial Hermann Hospital, we've got Texas Children's Hospital, and we also have MD Anderson Cancer Center Children's Hospital. And Ethan was treated at two of those. He was treated at Children's Memorial Hermann and MD Anderson Cancer Center. And then there's a really big Ronald McDonald House here that we also donate to. So we do a lot of that, and then we also spread them across the country. My wife and I, we took a trip out to Fredericksburg, and on the way we stopped at Austin, and we donated cubes and some toys to the Ronald McDonald House there, so that way we could kind of, you know, spread, like I said, spread his story and spread his love and spread his joy.
Yeah. So, when people search up Ethan's Ohana, I think one of the things that might pop up is a connection with Chick-fil-A. Could you
Hmm.
elaborate a little bit on some of this?
Yeah. So I always, we always loved Chick-fil-A as a family. You know, we always I would always take the kids there on for breakfast on the weekends, you know, to our neighborhood Chick-fil-A. And when uh in the hospital, you know, he hated the hospital food. I mean, who likes hospital food, right? There was a Chick-fil-A right kind of across the street from the hospital, and I would, when he was inpatient, I would go and get him. We would go get breakfast biscuits because that's what we loved. And then when we moved to MD Anderson Cancer Center, they had a Chick-fil-A inside the hospital as well, and we would get lunch and so on and so forth. Um, so what happened is a couple of weeks after Ethan passed away, I, you know, I was in a very depressive state, and I wasn't eating, and I, you know, woke up and said, "Oh, I'm gonna go get me something to eat." And I went and got in the car, and I drove to the Chick-fil-A here, and I went through the drive-through and I ordered two chicken biscuits because that's what I'd been doing. I'd been ordering one for me and one for Ethan. I ordered two, and then I just kind of sat in the car and cried the whole time because Ethan wasn't there to enjoy that biscuit. And then, what I did is I went back a week later and I kept going back to Chick-fil-A, and then, I would go and eventually I would just go inside and sit at a table, and I was always sitting at the same table. And then I had kind of about a year later had written about it as a Facebook post that I was doing this. And then I kind of I work for a television station in Houston, KPRC TV, and I wrote a kind of an article about it. And the article kind of went a little viral, and Chick-fil-A got word of it. And so the next Saturday morning when I went into my neighborhood Chick-fil-A, they had reserved that table for me.
Yeah.
And then, so I've been doing that for God, every Saturday for 4 years now. And last year on the 3-year anniversary of Ethan's passing, my wife and I, we were invited to the Chick-fil-A headquarters in Atlanta for a behind-the-scenes tour, and I actually gave a speech about it, and they actually produced a video about it, which is on our website and on Chick-fil-A's website. So yeah, and it's just kind of a beautiful story about how we go every Saturday morning, and I get two chicken biscuits, one for me and one for Ethan, and it kind of grounds me. It's really nice. It's something I look forward to, and it's funny because a lot of the discussions about Ethan's Ohana actually happen at that table, uh, at that table at Chick-fil-A, because usually we would kind of use that time to reflect and figure out things for the week and so on and so forth. So yeah.
So speaking of connections and people working together for a common goal, could you tell us a little bit about Cubes Against Cancer and maybe how you met Matt Lee? Because I keep hearing that there's a funny story, but I
There
need.
is a funny story. So, working at my TV station, Matt Lee, he's a speed cuber.
Right.
And so we have a show called Houston Life. And one day, I'm sitting at my desk, and I see coming up on Houston Life, we've got a speed cuber. I was like, what? A speed cuber? And
Oh,
this was maybe a year or so. I can't remember exactly when we had met. It was probably a year or not. It wasn't too long after Ethan had passed. And I had never met a speed cuber before. And so I was like, oh my God, I want to meet this guy because I just, with Rubik's Cubes and everything. And so he hadn't even gone on the show yet. And I walked into the green room, and he was there with his mom. And I just sat down. I said, hi, are you the speed cuber? He's like, yeah. I said, oh, what's your name, Matt? He says, oh my God, Matt, I got to tell you about the cubes. And I started telling him about Ethan and the cubes and this and that. And next thing you know, I mean, it's not a joyous story by any means because Ethan passed away. And I realized that, like we were kind of getting teary-eyed about it. And I realized, oh my God, he hadn't even been on the show yet. And I felt so bad because I thought I was just going to mess him up and he wasn't going to be able to be a guest on the show. But he was a pro, and he went on the show and he did his speed cubing. And then we kind of exchanged information. And then he contacted me afterwards, and he had a speed cubing competition here in Houston, and he invited me to come out, and I did. And we got like almost 90 cubes donated that day, and it kind of took off from there, with the cubes. In fact, that was our because of him, that was the big catalyst for our first big cube donation. So yeah.
yeah. It's amazing how you're able to meet other people and then kind of work together with them and then share Ethan's story and continue to grow the organization. I think that's amazing. It just shows like I think it also kind of shows like the speed cubing community just coming together. I think it's really
Yeah.
powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the as far as STEM goes, cubes I think are awesome and amazing, and especially for pediatric cancer patients because the hand-eye coordination, it's the twisting of it. I mean, Ethan, he had a reaction to one of the chemotherapy drugs, and so he had a little bit of right side loss of use of his hands, and it was like therapy to get him to use it.
Wow.
And making and having him think about the algorithms, pardon my French,
Right.
and those kind of things. He, like I said, he really mastered it, and it was amazing to watch. In fact, on our website is a picture of Ethan in a cube, and that is the first time he solved it. And so, because he's like, "Look, Dad, I solved it," and and then I took a picture of him. So
Yeah.
yeah, our website is Ethan's ETHANS Ohana.org. And like I said, we have all the stories there. You could, go
I'll put it
there.
in the description. Yeah.
Huh?
I'll make sure to link it in the description so
Perfect. Yes.
yeah.
Thank you.
And so, could you share like maybe a specific moment, like maybe a reaction from a patient or like another story that really showed you like the impact of Ethan's Ohana?
Yeah, that's a tough one because honestly, I know that I don't really get, unfortunately, I don't get to see the patients
Okay.
with the
Okay.
cubes.
I see.
A lot of, when you're dealing with pediatric cancer patients, it's not like I can go to the hospital and visit because, they're immunocompromised. In fact, all of our cubes have to be new in a box because these
Okay.
patients are immunocompromised. But I do have a couple of examples. From a lot of the hospital staff. They will, we're still friends with a lot of the doctors and a lot of the nurses and the child life specialists, and they all are always letting us know, like, oh, I walked into a patient's room and they, there was a cube on their table, and I asked them, like, oh, have you figured out how to solve it? And or they asked them where they got it from, and they said, oh, from Ethan's Ohana. And so I know that we've made an impact because I hear it firsthand from the uh, the hospital staff and the doctors and so on, and those type of people. So yeah.
So looking forward in the next couple of years or maybe even longer, what are your dreams or goals for Ethan's Ohana?
Whoa, that's so
I know it's a
you know
deep question. Yeah.
yeah, that is a deep
Yeah.
question
Yeah.
because my ultimate goal would be obviously to fund research to find a cure for pediatric cancer,
Okay.
right? I mean, that's a big one. But like I said, just to share his story, I think it's his story is very unique, and his story, it's a sad story, right?
Yeah.
And I just, like I said, we just want to ease the burden for families that are going through it. And and sometimes it's sometimes it's something so small. It could just be a gift of a cube, because that could really, I saw what it did with Ethan, how it lit him up and how it gave him, how it he loved doing it because he would do these little competitions with some of the doctors, and he'd be like, okay, well, if I could solve it in 30 seconds, and or it was those kind of, it helped him build a relationship with the staff. And like I said, it gave him a goal to do, and he really enjoyed it. But at the end of the day, we just want, we don't want other families to have to go and endure what we endured. You know,
Yeah.
that's really that's really it.
Yeah. So on that note, thank you for joining me today, and thank you for sharing Ethan's story. It
Thank you very much for having me.
really means a lot that you're able to join me and take the time to explain the organization, Ethan's story, and ways that people can help by donating cubes. And I'll have the website linked in my description if anyone is interested in going through the website, which you definitely should because there's a lot of interesting stuff on there. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to leave a like, leave a comment, and share it with the fellow cuber. Thank you, everyone, for joining.